But I wanted to talk about crypto, and we're talking about this because I feel like I should know more about it as someone who can build computers and do all that stuff, and yet I feel like I'm kind of disconnected from the. Like right now, Bitcoin's going crazy, right? It's increased like in half its value in like a week and a half or something.
Definitely
I went up 50% in the last week or something like that, 40-some-odd%. And we're, by the way, we're having this conversation. We're June 26th. Shout out to Jordan Lejeune, a good friend of mine.
Is his birthday?
Yeah, okay. It's his birthday. But so the reality is crypto right now is going nuts, and there's many reasons for it. I think there's political unrest, obviously. There's tension between China and America, and so there's this like, okay, where do we put our money? Because the dollar could be destabilized. There's a lot of talk about using other currencies. Iran is leading those talks. There's been many places that have led these talks for a long time, and so we create this giant geopolitical landscape where America is fighting to be relevant. It sounds crazy, but they are fighting to stay as the superpower.
For the first time in World War II?
Well, I think it's the first time that they've ever been challenged. I believe that this is the first real time that America is being challenged from its number one position in all sectors of everything. So technology used to lead. GDP used to lead. Consumerism it used to lead. Military it used to lead. Dollar it used to lead. Financial fiscal policies, all those things, was the number one, bar none, in the world. I mean, obviously it had transferred power from kind of the European market when America kind of became more and more relevant, but when in kind of 1913, the early 20s, or those periods of time when Europe got devastated by the First World War and then eventually the Second World War, it completely shifted power, and America became the number one superpower in the world without a doubt in every category in the 50s, 60s, and so on and so forth.
We're just leading.
Yeah. Now, I say this being politically mindful that, I didn't lead in happiness necessarily. It didn't lead necessarily in education. It didn't lead in the best food in the world, in my opinion. And anybody can argue these things, but on a subjective level...
Economically...
on an objective level, economically, it definitely dominated. So forever, it became the world's reserve currency. And when it becomes a reserve currency, it basically says... no matter what you do, no matter what you produce, you're using our dollars to trade in the most traded things on the planet. Some of those things is oil, right? One of those major pieces is oil. And so what that does is it says, well, when our dollar goes up and our economy does well, no matter what, whose economy is doing well, the more it buys oil, the more it needs dollars. That's right. So we are rising. It is rising with any economy in the globe because everyone needs dollars. But there's been attempts to move away from the dollars. Venezuela wanted to move away from the dollars. Libya wanted to move away from the dollars. Iraq wanted to move away from the dollars. These are, dotted throughout history. There's been many countries and organizations that have wanted to move away. And the BRIC countries specifically, BRIC is Brazil, Russia, India, and China, naturally. And then there's some other countries that are now, you might consider part of that. Turkey's getting a lot of momentum and power in certain ways. All of which are interested in potentially moving away from the dollar.
And these conversations are starting to happen.
Well, then you throw Facebook in there as well. So not only on like Facebook starts announcing it, with that adds a huge boost to it as well. But how do we start looking at technology and companies as their own political
store of bank?
Yeah, GDP.
Yeah. So one of the amazing conversations we had with this really interesting man who came by here, we talked a lot about how brands hold equity, meaning. Like, what is Nike other than a brand that has a huge amount of social equity built into the fact that I say just do it and what I'm talking about.
That's right. It's a trusted brand.
Exactly. So what's happening is as companies can tap into being a bank because they have data and they're in a new like a technological bank now, they are tapping in and they're announcing, in Facebook's case, he's talking about Libra. So Libra is the name of a cryptocurrency that they're launching. It is not a decentralized cryptocurrency. It will be a centralized cryptocurrency, which kind of ruins the...
they're catching on the buzzword, but it's still based off of
it allows
cash reserve.
Exactly, and it's great business for Facebook. It's brilliant. But the reality is that when the market gets shaky... and now you're in China and you're like, fuck, I don't know if this is going to be really good for me. I'm going to move away from the yuan and I'm going to move away from the dollar because they're pegged, right? One is linked to the other, and that's how China gained so much momentum, is that in a free market, things should have been different. And I'll explain that in half a second. But the point is that it naturally favors it's almost like an anti-market maker. Cryptocurrency moves opposite, or it has a reverse correlation to how the market is moving. So if the market is scared that we're going to go to war with Iran, or the market is scared that a tariff war is going to go on between China and America, everyone wins by moving into something that is kind of asymmetric risk. It's saying, rather than putting all my eggs in dollars, I'm going to put some of my eggs in Bitcoin. So if dollars go down, Bitcoin goes up, I'm recovering and I'm winning asymmetrically. And that's just a good investment strategy.
Yeah, so crypto benefits from being an alternative.
Yeah.
And now alternatives are looking good.
Alternatives are looking great because there's a lot of political unrest, there's a lot of challenges on the planet, and it's a shaky time in the market. Now, the half of why China has been able to catch up to America is because it made a move. It made multiple moves, but under Mao, it made a move to say, okay, we're going to become capitalist for a while. Everything is going to be, we're going to run a communist system in terms of you don't own anything if you're a Chinese citizen, but we're going to be capitalist in the way that we are going to approach monetary policy and trade with the rest of the world. And what we're going to do, and the smartest thing they did, and I don't remember exactly when they did it, but they basically pegged the yuan, so the currency in China, mainland China, to the US dollar. And so what happens is, naturally, they open up their markets and say, hey, come build your factories here. And we do that because it's cheaper. It's easier to build in a place where there's a ton of people, a ton of labor, and it's way cheaper, and it can just ship it right back to us. And there's a free trade kind of flow. There's very little tariffs. They're entering into this golden age where they are receiving all our manufacturing jobs, all the things that we want to build, the iPhones, all the stuff, all go there. Great. That's phenomenal for both parties. Why? America gets cheaper labor and therefore gets cheaper goods, so it can spend more, its GDP grows, and we get richer because all of these things are cheaper than they would have been had we had to continuously manufacture them.
So you have more buying power
West.
without having to make more money.
Exactly. And without having to print more, now necessarily having to produce more, we are now getting a better, richer quality of life in some ways, right?
Yeah.
Not in all ways, but in some ways. Materialistically, unfortunately.
In ways that were good for the 80s.
In ways that are good for materialism, in ways that are horrible for environmentalism.
Yeah.
But very good for the 80s and 90s, all that stuff. Even early 2000s in some ways. What happens, though, what should have happened, is if the currency isn't pegged, as our money goes there, the yuan should have raised in value, and therefore that balance between how much cheaper things are would have played out. But there's two imbalances that are there. They have way more people. So even if people are getting richer, there's always a new supply of people moving from the farms in China to the city who are willing to work for pennies on the dollar again. And so they have this endless loop of supply. It's not endless, but it's much deeper than
like
America's, obviously. So we have to change the game. But because it's pegged, and China keeps it pegged, and even though America kind of knew that could create an imbalance, we were addicted to the goods.
Yeah.
We were addicted to cheap, made in China's dollar store throwaway culture goods, because that's the culture that that was the golden age of American consumerism, has now risen to this. We don't buy quality, we buy the next thing.
Yeah.
But like fridges used to last way longer, cars used to last way longer. We haven't made things better, we've just made them cheaper. And so we've been able to maintain through inflation without necessarily rising the entire system in the same way it should have. And because of that, because of the peg, it kept that disparity, meaning it kept flooding jobs, and it kept the demand and supply curve acting in an unnatural way. Whereas naturally, if we actually fully did full market natural economics, we would have evened out, and less of those jobs would have gone to China.
We would have
slowly
less
but surely we
incentive
would have been
to give it to
similar.
them. Yeah.
It would have cost roughly the same to do it in China
So why
versus
bother?
here, and in fact, it should have been cheaper because we didn't have to ship stuff. But because that wasn't really the case, and because most other markets like Canada, blah blah blah, any other market
do the same.
also no, but it's not that they do the same. They also move with America. Meaning a crisis in America often creates a crisis everywhere. So inherently, it's almost like pegging to the world. By pegging to the dollar that everyone else uses, we're all pegged to the American system. And that is wildly efficient but it's incredibly dangerous. It creates a need for China to buy American currency so that inherently it has to mitigate against certain problems. But then it created that China got all our money, bought American dollars, and now we're unlinkably tied. We can't hit the other without being hit ourselves because they have the most amount of debt and they have the most amount of gold. So it's like if we go to war with them, then they start a financial war with us. So inevitably, it has to escalate to another kind of war. We cannot fight a financial war with them fully. So we try these tariffs, we try and negotiate and strong arm, but the truth is we can't compete. There's only one solution. They unpeg or they change certain things, they do certain other things, or we literally go to war, physical war, or cyber war or technological war. So that's what we're seeing the signs of first, right? We're seeing the signs of the war against 5G. China's winning that race. They have, I think it was 64% of all 5G patents in the world. They're winning that race landslide. They're winning the manufacturing race. Their GDP is rising faster. Their middle class is getting stronger and stronger because they don't have the lag that we do. In our case, we have to study everything and do everything. They just go. And they're funded by the government and they have all these different things, but that creates a fear that companies like Huawei are run essentially by the Chinese government. So 5G networks come all over here and all our phones and all our smart devices are connected to it. Technically, there might be a back door where China's just getting access to everything that we have.
Probably not technically. Probably just is.
Well,
I would.
It's happened in the past.
The likelihood that it has a back door. I mean, look, it's a risk that we can't. That we, and I say we, I'm lumping myself in this, but that Americans, in a sense, can't accept. I understand why that's the case, and for me, it creates the fear that there is no other solution other than a giant fight between two powers. It's essentially the Cold War, but that is becoming more and more hot. And anybody who's going to move against the American dollar, anybody who's going to move against siding with China is going to create two things that America cannot let happen because it will weaken the entire system. And we, Canada, most of us here are Canadian, Garrett's here from America, but we kind of have to follow what America is doing because we're also using American dollars and our biggest trading partner is America and so on and so forth. But many other markets, Europe, other things aren't quite so linked. So they could side with China a little bit more. They're a little bit more free agent. Like they're still tied to us, to the West in that way, but they could have more flexibility. Now, the countries that have the most flexibility are countries that already have sanctions against them. Iran, Russia.
They're already dealing with it.
They're already dealing with like, I don't have the benefits of America because you guys cut me off and sanctioned me, and all the countries that are in cahoots with America also sanction me, so I have to go the alternate route. And so you are creating this fight. We're creating a divide between powers that essentially are anti-American interests and powers that are, anti-Chinese interests, if you will. But I won't even just call it Chinese. It's alternative interests.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
And
it's basically
just China's just winning that game. And they're winning that game because they invest in with a longer-term mindset.
We were talking about this before, where it's like
the Brick and Road project, meaning the new Silk Road that they built.
Because America has like every 4 to 8 years, they're completely shifting their entire world policy and all their relationships to everybody and just switching gears and.
Well, exactly. So Obama would have never done the things that we're seeing now.
Yeah.
So the truth is that because we have this ever-changing presidency that is going on in democracy that is of this nature,
and this 49-51 that keeps.
Yeah, so that we're hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. So all our policies are fucking mishmashed together, and we're not essentially getting anything done because we're not effectively doing full socialism or full communism, and we're not effectively doing full market economics either. So we're not letting the hand play, and even if we did, China's not.
And so there's
because it's pegging. So inherently, it's going to the country that has the most control is going to win, and unfortunately for most people, the countries that have the most control are actually the ones that are most evil, quote unquote. I don't necessarily feel that way personally, but inherently they are more controlling. And China and Russia are perfect examples of countries that have significantly more control over their media, more control over their education system, more control over their land and their people.
There's no
They're
red
a
tape.
more homogenous group of people, whereas Americans have a mentality of freedom. Therefore, we are fighting cultural wars a lot, right? That's the whole, and it's great. That's great. It's a liberal progressivism is happening, and a lot of people are not happy about that in America. Obviously, the right in this case is the more conservative people. But the truth is that we are fighting other wars, but those things are dividing us. Whereas the wars that are being fought from China is like China's uniting. You know, Huawei gets banned in America, and Huawei's sales go up because everyone's like, oh, now I know exactly who to buy and not to buy. Because they see, and specifically, unfortunately, Trump is a figurehead that is so polarizing. He's so easy to hate from abroad that inherently...
Not just from abroad.
Sure, but he's so easy to hate from especially abroad that you associate Americans as like that thing, unfortunately, and then energy, and you're like, oh my God, and so there's a repulsion.
Yeah, whereas people used to idolize the West. They were the cool kids.
Well, because they won the other wars, right?
Yeah.
So they won the economic war was the first one. They had a military war, so even if you don't like me, fuck you, because we have the bigger guns. But now that's changing to some degree because nobody wins in this kind of war.
Yeah, it's like if anybody pulls the trigger, it's like bad for everybody.
Exactly. So we're in a position where it's like China has the largest standing army. We Americans, let's say, might have a much larger, I don't know, nuclear arsenal, but that changes nothing because none of us want to use it because if we do, we're all fucked.
I wonder if could you imagine China just rolls out solutions that we just haven't even thought of? Like, yeah, we work on our military just quietly. We just didn't tell people what we were working on.
Why
would we show our hand? That's right.
No, well, 100% that China has things that we don't know about, and we meaning Canada, all countries have things that maybe others don't know about.
Certainly.
But China is phenomenal at hacking. They're phenomenal at a bunch of different things that we don't have that same. I highly doubt that we can hack WeChat and Alibaba in the same way that they can hack Amazon and Facebook. And here's I think the proof of it. Look at what Russia was able to do to the American elections. It's not even
with just some memes. Yeah. It's just like buying memes
and Facebook ads and just like growing a dissent. And remember, they don't have to win everyone. They just have to win that 1%, that 51-49. Right? They just need to target the specific people, and that's where the Cambridge Analytica is, and that data pool is so massive. So
that's right. So right now, crypto's doing great.
Yeah.